So this is going to be the beginning of doing the top panel, doing the black bars on the top panel to hide the UV lights that are in the frame. You got to remember the top panel is going to be about 1/4 inch inside the frame. So if you're going to want the black border to show, you're going to have to go a 1/2 inch or higher. So that way you have enough of the black border showing past the frame to hide the UV light strip. And you don't always have to do just plain black bars. You can also do designs and stuff. Like this one, I put some eyeballs in there, and I did like the outline of a guy's face. And what you can do is, once you get the black paint on, you would go and scrape off the black paint and then do your glow paint on that, and don't cover the backside with black paint. Otherwise the UV paint won't actually get charged with the UV light. I suggest doing the black border on there and then scratching in the design you want to do, like if it's ivy leaves and vines, or maybe some lettering or your signature. Because if you try to paint around the lettering or the lines, you might accidentally get black paint on them. It's very hard not to when you're going around the paint. Once they're kind of on the glow paint, you kind of get stuck having to scrape the paint off and redo it. So I would do the black border first, and then scratch whatever design you're going to do down into the panel until you hit the clear part, and then put your glow paint on there. And of course you don't always have to use black for the border. I just do that because it matches the frames. And what I do is to make sure that the black lines that I put on here are even and don't, angle, or, they're not starting out one thickness and ending another one, is I'll use the T-roller, and I'll do it along the bottom edge of where I'm putting the line. And then since I want to have the line look as straight as possible, when I go to do the other line, I'm going to flip the panel around and do the same thing with the T-roller along the bottom. That way, no matter which way you put in the panel, whatever edge of the panel is going to be inside the frame is going to be level going the whole way with itself. That way you don't get any kind of crookedness or look to it. And as long as you make your border fairly straight, then it'll have a nice, clean, professional type appearance with the aesthetics of the frame. So I'm going to go through, and what I do is I'll just use like the 1-inch mark on the T-roller. I'll go along the bottom, and I'll put about 5 marks going the length of the panel. And then I'll tape it off with the painter's tape, and then I'll lightly score it. Very, very lightly, because unfortunately when you score too deep on the panels, even though you put black paint on it, it doesn't always hide the scratches, and that can, you can either use that technique to make a design or put paint on the scratches too, but it will show if you do the scratches too deep. So I'm going to very, very lightly do the scoring after I tape off the area that I want painted. That way I can kind of stay in the area and just give it a little bit of a scuff, so that way the paint can stick nice and good to the panel. I do the black bars on the back side to make sure that you don't get dust buildup, because I don't like the idea of having dust buildup on paintings, especially on the outer one, because when you do get dust, you're going to want to be able to take like a damp paper towel and clean the surface area. And if you have paint on the surface, on the outside of the painting, there is a chance that when you go to do it, you can either mess up the paint, or dust can build up along the very edge and give it kind of a dingier look to the painting over time. And then of course, same thing, if you're going to scuff the panel, I suggest not using sandpaper and doing like a scratcher tool, so that you can pick up the larger debris easier and not have it become airborne and get into the air that you're breathing. So with about 5 marks going on this panel, that'll give me enough of a guideline to make sure I get the tape lined up the way it's supposed to. I always make sure, since we're painting this portion of the panel here, I always do it to where the tape line is right on or above these little marks that I made, because if they're not at least next to the paint or hidden by the paint, then they can show and kind of give it like a cheaper appearance to the finished frame. Taping off of the black borders I'm going to do on the panel to block the view of the UV lights. I already did one and I scored it, and I'll show you how I line up the tape. I want to make sure that you use a piece of tape that can go from a little bit past the edge of the panel all the way to at least the middle. When I go to pull the tape, I fold the tab over first, and then when I pull the tape, I kind of try to pull it from the roll pretty straight so it doesn't get too much of a curl going. In the right position with the tape right above the dot, and then the next one. The most important part about this step is making sure that the line is straight, no matter how thick or thin the black stripe is that you're painting. This is going to take probably 3 or 4 coats of black paint just to kind of get a good start going on it. What I'll do is I'll just put it on real thick like that, and then I'll paint a little bit towards the tape like that, and that'll be my initial coat towards the tape, and then I'll just take the rest off of the brush, you know, kind of filling in the rest. What I'll do is I'll set this on the light table so that I can see where the black paint isn't solidly painted, and I'll do 2 more coats, and then what I'll do is I'll take the tape off and let it dry overnight, and then I'll put the panel back on the light table again and check for any other spots that are not necessarily dark enough to block the UV light, because it looks nice and clean when you have the black strip painted nice and solid to where you don't see any of the light through the thinner parts of the paint. The other way to do it is if you take the panel and hang it off the edge of your painting surface, and then you would put the flashlight lit right under the edge of the paint so that you can see how thin or thick the paint is. So this is the stencil that I'm using for the signature. It's 2-sided. That way when I put it down on the panel in position, then when I flip the panel over, I'll be able to see it in reverse. So that way I can put the paint on the inside of the panel and have everything turn out properly. This is where I chose to do my signature on the top panel. But since it is going to be the top panel, all the paint needs to be on the back side of the panel. So what I do is I put my signature stencil here on the front side so that I can see where it's going to be. And then what you do is you will lightly score this area here, and then you're going to do glow paint because I want to have it hidden by glow paint. I'm going to have regular neon paint for the lettering so that it shows with the lights on, and then when you turn the lights off, you won't see any of the lettering. You'll only see glow paint and the dot rocks that I'm going to do. When you score this area, you're going to want to use very light pressure. I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do is lightly score the pattern of the mist that I'm going to do. That way the dust shape is how I want, and then I'm going to add the glow paint first, because you're going to have to put that layer on first to hide the neon paint, so that way you can have it disappear. And also applying the glow paint first is going to prevent you from getting any paint built up along the ridges of the lettering to be put on. So if you do the lettering last, then that should create a situation to where the glow paint will obscure any kind of view of the lettering, because the lettering will not glow. So I'm just going to start, and I'm going to do some very light scoring. Now we're ready to apply a few light coats of the paint, and I'm kind of going for a streaky, blotchy kind of look, so that way I can get a decent amount of little rocks in there too, kind of camouflaged in there. I'm just going to go right over the signature area, and since the medium is clear and the paint is going to be on thin, I'll still be able to use the stencil to make sure I have accurate lines for my signature. So I'm going to let that first coat dry, and I'll probably do 2 more coats, and then I'll use the bamboo skewer and go over the lettering. Now that I have the initial coat on the going over the lettering area for the signature, I'm going to add some glow paint so I can add some speck rocks mixed in with the dust cloud. And I'm going to avoid doing any over top of where the lettering is going to be, but I will go next to the lettering. That way it can kind of camouflage the area to give it a little bit more natural look when the lights are off and the painting's glowing. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm also going to have a little bit of black specks in here, and then I'm also going to go over these lighter glow specks with black on the back so that I can create the appearance of small rocks that have a lit half and a dark half to them. So when you're doing it, you may want to do something other than just round shapes. You can do some of those straighter lines so that they look like little splinters of rock that are broken off, that are also floating mixed in with the debris here. I'm going to let that dry and then go over the speck dots with some black paint so that they can look like all the other rocks in the painting and kind of match. So this is one of the expanded PVC panels that I use for the back panels. I use the expanded PVC for the back also because it's a little bit cheaper than the acrylic panels, and it's not a very reflective surface, and it does have a little bit of porous finish to it, and it's gonna add less weight to the painting if you're using the expanded PVC. It does not weigh as much as the acrylic panels. The thinnest you can get this stuff is 1/8 of an inch, which is what this stuff is. So the real difference when you're doing the framing part is going to be that you're going to need a wider gap for this panel in the frame. But that kind of works out good because you can also use it as a distinguishing feature of the frame wood to determine which part of the wood is the back panel's part, or how they line up properly. What I got going here is, this is my darkest blue that I mixed up. One of the things I do at first is I'll do like a real thin coat just so that I can have an area to work with some type of shape, and then I can develop the outside shapes or something like that. Have it maybe going like an upward. That way it's not just so in line with the moon dust and everything from the comet coming through. I can get a couple of different angles going. This first coat, I try to get it pretty even. The other thing you gotta kind of think about too is you don't want to go too close to the edges, because then you're gonna get it cut off by the frame. I kind of keep them towards the center a little bit more than other things, because you're gonna want to have it to where you have room to paint towards the frame. What I did was I did a real wet coat of the paint, and then I went back and I kind of used the medium tone of paint to kind of almost like make myself some notes about where I wanted to put some more of these types of clouds. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to water this paint down, so that way when I do the little puddles of paint, they'll dry very smooth and solid. So I'm going to get a decent amount, because when you do this technique it does use quite a bit of paint, but the outcome's worth it. And just kind of mix water through until you get to the right consistency. And then all you do, like initially what you do is you just put down the shape if you're kind of mapping it out, to kind of decide where everything is, but you're not done adding extra paint to it yet to get it to the right brightness. You can go back over it again with the watered down paint and get your shapes nice and solid. You can see here it's a lot thicker, and then it kind of goes thinner, and that's to allow a dark spot so that the lighter spot for the next tier of nebula can show. Keep that in mind when you're doing this. You don't want to go all crazy and just make the whole thing a solid blob. Unless you're going to put like a different color on top of it that's drastically different, then it probably wouldn't matter. But if you're using the same kind of colors for most of this, then it may be best to let it get thin so that it starts to show black color behind it again. So I have a few large stars here, a few large stars here. And what I did was I used the T-roller across the bottom edge to get my vertical lines, and then I use a triangle along the edge of the T-roller to do my horizontal lines for the stars. That way they're nice and straight to the bottom, because like I said before, this bottom edge of the panel is going to dictate how it sits in the frame. So as long as you're using a T-roller with the bottom edge of the panel, then you should have all your stars should look straight, instead of having some that are cockeyed. You know, it was gonna make it look kind of funny. I stick with the one style. You can do the longer points in an X shape instead, but if you do, then all the stars should match that. The look of it can be kind of not convincing when the stars are going different directions, because usually when you're looking at a picture of space, it's from the one angle, and all the brighter points of light are making those points of the stars in the same direction. The other thing I did, once I got my large stars placed, I went and I did the dot stars. Now those are real easy. I just start with a white base coat and then go back over it 2 or 3 times with glow paint to make sure it's bright enough to show. The dispersal of them is kind of like randomized. Some people like to flick like white paint to make all the stars, but I find you get a lot of mist paint that's really, really small, and even if you put the glow paint on top, sometimes they don't show, especially in a painting that has multiple layers that go beyond like 5 or 6. It can keep these from charging to their full brightness. One thing that can happen when you're doing the back panel is it can look really, really plain until you put the stars on there. The other thing I did was I had some streaks going across the other colors. This one won't show too much because the moon is right here. But what you do is you go along the path that you want to take with the other color on top of the blue, and you would do black and then just fill it in with the green. When you're doing stars that have points on them, if you trust yourself, you can do them by hand. Sometimes the larger ones, I will actually tape off the lines and use tape. That way I can make sure that the lines are very straight. The one thing you have to watch out for with tape is sometimes when you're filling in the line to be painted, if the paint is on top of lumpy glow paint like this area here where it's built up, then you might get paint leaching under the tape. So usually I try to do these by hand, and I just used watered down white paint for the base coat and go over it, and then I'll go over it with the glow color and then start building the paint instead of trying to tape it off and having the paint leak under the tape, because that can cause some problems with the look and appearance of the nebula that you already have there.